Part 52. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 511. 300 rounds of fighting? Do you think you can coax me well like this? Xianyuan looked at her silently, feeling slightly annoyed by her indifference. Am I that kind of person? No, Chu Hong'ai raised her eyebrows, then forget it. What's the point? Xianyuan reached out and picked her up, walking quickly to the inner room. What I want is to fight 300 rounds every night. Chu Hong'ai looked at the roof and said calmly, you are confident in your physical strength. Daughter-in-law Xianyuan paused and looked down at her expressionlessly. Are you doubting your husband's ability? Chu Hong'ai said, no, I am reminding you not to be blindly confident. They are all mortals, not indestructible. Normal people need adequate rest. 300 rounds of fighting every night? Let alone protecting the family and the country and revitalizing the palace, it is still unknown whether he can survive until this time next year. Xianyuan curled his lips. Does my wife dislike me? Why are you not following me at all today? They were about to be separated, and he had to stay alone in an empty room. She actually didn't feel sorry for him at all. Chu Hong'ai said, a little farewell is better than a wedding. Xianyuan. This can be considered a test for you, Chu Hong'ai said. If you really can't bear the pain of lovesickness, you might be able to take in 2 concubines while I'm not at home. Xianyuan's face darkened. Daughter-in-law, who do you think I am? My husband's love for you is so obvious, how can I look down on other vulgar fans? Yeah. Xianyuan put her on the bed and pressed her down. Husband, I will prove it to you now. Chu Hong'ai looked at the flower-like face in front of her, turned over neatly, pressed him under her in a blink of an eye, lowered her head and kissed his lips. Although the regent asked me to live in the palace, it didn't say that I couldn't leave the palace during this period. Xianyuan looked at her dissatisfied. Daughter-in-law, why do you only speak for outsiders? Outsider? Chu Hong'ai frowned slightly, trying to say that the regent was not an outsider, but this sentence didn't seem right. The prince regent was indeed an outsider. But this outsider was someone they had to listen to. I understand what you mean. If you want me to die, I have no choice but to die. Xianyuan spread his limbs and lay on the bed, looking like he was ready to take your pick. Anyway, I have kept this account in mind, and I will definitely look for opportunities in the future. Get it back. Chu Hong'ai kissed him again. If the regent really wants your life, I will never listen to him. Even if I raise an army to rebel, I will definitely protect you. Xianyuan was so moved that he immediately hooked her neck and pulled her down, kissed her lips. Daughter-in-law. Chu Hong'ai hummed, with a rare coaxing tone in her voice, you should thank Her Majesty the Queen and the Regent for the family background of Prince Jing's mansion and the Chu family. Without their consent, it would be very difficult for the 2 families to get married. Xianyuan said nothing. Even if we persist, the process will definitely be full of twists and turns, Chu Hong'ai said, so this grievance is nothing. Xianyuan looked at her dissatisfied. Daughter-in-law, why are you so virtuous? Virtuous? Chu Hong'ai was thinking about whether this term was suitable for her, but she said, isn't it good to be virtuous? Xianyuan wanted to say that you shouldn't be a virtuous person, and should be more forceful and domineering in such unreasonable matters. However, when he thought of the more powerful and domineering man in the palace, if he really went hard with him, there might be some consequences. What are the consequences? Xianyuan then took a rest in depression, pulled Chu Hong'ai down and kissed her arbitrarily, and concentrated on the first round of the battle with his wife. It's evening and it's still early. The long night was long enough for them to slowly learn from each other round by round. Her Majesty the Queen and the Prince Regent were about to leave, and the eldest princess entered the palace to take care of her grandson. Naturally, she also knew about Rong-Yu's arrangements. After hearing this, she was actually silent for a while. 11 She spoke in a rather subtle tone. And Hongyi managed to survive 10 months of pregnancy, and now they are deeply in love. Just a few days later, you separated the young couple. Isn't it inappropriate? Kind. Nan 11 pondered for a moment and said in a calm tone, "It is the duty of a minister to share your worries with you." The eldest princess was speechless for a moment. In the marriage between Chu Hongyi and Xian Yuanqi, I helped them a lot and solved a lot of troubles for them. I also gave them a golden whip that can repel all the women from aristocratic families who covet my cousin. Nan 11 smiled lightly. Giving comes first, employing people comes second. You can't just accept grace and do nothing. After hearing this, the eldest princess was speechless for a moment, but for a moment she felt that what she said seemed to make sense. Although she thought that this matter must be Rong Yu's decision, Rong Yu and Nan 11 are husband and wife. If Nan 11 disagrees, Rong Yu will definitely not make the decision on his own. She just feels. 11 is really different from before. Nowadays, whether she speaks or acts, Nan 11 carries the meticulous demeanor and majesty that a queen should have. She is no longer as gentle as a little girl in a boudoir as before. The eldest princess's eyes fell on Nan 11's face, with a somewhat incredible sigh on her face. 11 since you came to Dongling, you seem to be a different person. After all, the water and soil of Dongling can make people reborn. Or does the throne allow people to grow faster? Nan 11 was slightly surprised, then smiled. Since you are in this position, you should naturally learn to be like an empress. You may be tolerant, but the king of a country is still the king of a country no matter what. They must remember who is the king and who is the minister. What is the duty of a minister? It is to obey the will of the emperor unconditionally. Thunder and rain are all the grace of the emperor. This sentence is never said casually. Nan 11 never mind showing her tolerant side in front of the ladies, but the principle will not change. Rong Yu is the regent, his decision is her decision, and she will not refute His Majesty on any occasion. The princess understood what she meant, hummed, and quickly changed the subject. When do you plan to come back from your trip to Dezhou? I won't stay too long, Nan 11 said, after dealing with the important affairs over there and calming the court. When Prince Yun can sit firmly on the throne, Rong Yu and I should come back. After coming back this time, they probably won't go to Dezhou again in a short time. Maybe after 3 to 5 years or 10 to 8 years, if they want to go back, they will go back together. After all, there is really no one worth worrying about in Dezhou. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 512. On the 6th day of September, the weather is perfect and suitable for traveling. Rong Yu and Nan 11 did not leave the palace with great fanfare, but after arranging all the affairs in the palace, on a dark and windy night, one evening, they changed into light clothes. Qing Chao Ji Unkong left the palace, took a few but absolutely elite master secret guards, and quietly left the Dongling imperial capital. Many ministers in the court knew that they were leaving, but not many knew when they were leaving. After all, it is not a trivial matter for a king to leave the palace, and some people with ulterior motives will inevitably try to assassinate him. Although Rong Yu has enough ability to protect Nan 11, isn't it more comfortable to quietly treat the journey as a day of fun than to deal with assassinations all day long? Besides, both Rong Yu and Nan 11 like to walk quietly and low-key, and don't like to be overly public. The journey is long, and it is better to walk leisurely and rest than to attract attention with a group of people. It took less than a month to walk from Dongling to Dazhu. Encountering Juxiao Pavilion's property along the way, Rong Yu would take Nan 11 to stay and rest, and get to know some of his subordinates he had never met before. Passing by beautiful places, Rong Yu would deliberately stop and take Nan 11 to appreciate the local customs, see the vast mountains, rivers, and seas, gallop in the wind on the vast prairie, and watch countless horses flying on the grassland or in the valley. Ben's healthy posture. These are all properties under Juxiao Pavilion. Rong Yu pointed to the countless horses on the fertile border grassland, enough to equip 400,000 sophisticated cavalry. 400,000 cavalry? Nan 11 looked at the strong and well-tamed war horses in the distance, and said nothing for a long time. A strong country cannot be separated from its army, and a strong army cannot be separated from its cavalry. But even if they were once as tough as northern Xinjiang and Dezhou, it would be difficult for them to meet the standard of equipping 400,000 cavalry minus 400,000 soldiers and horses, and 400,000 cavalry are completely different concepts. These are just some of them. Rong Yu smiled lightly, there are others elsewhere. Juxiao Pavilion has a special horse breeding farm, which is managed by dedicated people who are proficient in horse breeding. It can provide at least 500,000 strong war horses every year. This is also Juxiao Pavilion's special horse breeding farm. One of the sources of income. Nan 11 said, "Fortunately I married you." Rong Yu was silent for a moment, then couldn't help laughing. "What are you talking about? Are you afraid that I will swallow up your country?" "No," Nan 11 smiled lightly, "I mean these war horses are mine, Juxiao Pavilion is mine, and yours is mine. I am the richest queen in the world." After hearing these words, Rong Yu smiled particularly happily. "Yes, I belong to 11er too. 11er is the richest person in the world, whether it is Tianhuang nobles or wealthy businessmen, they are all defeated by 11er. Nan 11 turned to look at him and raised her eyebrows slightly. "Aren't you afraid that one day I will get tired of the old and kick you out, and then enjoy your wealth and favor other men?" If he had heard this in the past, Rong Yu would have said something domineering about not allowing it, but today he just lowered his eyes and said, "I risked all my wealth and life just to love you unreservedly. If it comes to this at that time, I continued to worry about gains and losses, fearing that 11er would betray me in the future. This was a distrust of you and an underestimation of myself." Nan 11 was silent. "Besides, what are these properties?" Rong Yu held her hand and said in a low and calm voice, 11er loves me, and I am the richest and happiest man in the world. If 11er doesn't love me, what's the use of worrying? Keeping these things won't give me any more confidence, so I'll just give them to you and I'll find a cliff and jump off it myself." The previous words were quite sincere and touching, but after hearing the last sentence, Nan 11's expression instantly became strange. She raised her eyes and glanced at him. "Find a cliff to jump off?" Rong Yu was silent for a moment and nodded slowly. "It would be better to die. You have spent so much effort to reunite in this life, and you are willing to die like this. 11er is willing to love me, even if she goes through all kinds of hardships. It's worth it." Rong Yu said, "If 11er doesn't love me, no matter how much effort it takes to reunite, it may just mean burden and pain to 11er. Trouble. If that's the case, why should I force it?" Nan 11 was silent for a long time. It should be said that she didn't know what to say for a moment. Hit him? Reluctant to part with it? Scold him? She was not good at cursing in her previous life. But to be honest, his words "it's better to just die" really made her want to take action. "It's really rare to see such a considerate regent," she said lightly. "If that's the case, why do you insist on forcing me to go back to Dazhu with you?" Rong Yu groaned, with confusion on his face. "Forcing? Didn't 11er come back with me willingly?" Listen, his tone is so innocent, it really sounds like he has been wronged. Nan 11 glanced at him casually. "Rong Yu?" Nan 11 turned around and walked towards the direction where the carriage was parked. "When you return to Dongling from Dezhou, you can go and ask Xian Yuanqi for advice when you have time." Rong Yu held her hand and couldn't help but raise the corner of his mouth. "What do you want me to ask for?" "I want to learn the essence of singing," Nan 11 said. "If you don't want to be the regent in the future, you can find a job in the theater." Rong Yu smiled happily. "I only sing for 11er, and I only perform for 11er." Nan 11 looked at the vast sky in the distance. was silent for a moment, and sighed softly, I finally got a reunion, how can I bear to betray you again? Rong Yu's heart felt hot, and a sour and astringent throbbing fermented in his lungs. He held her hand tightly unconsciously, and said in a low voice, in this life, we will not let each other down, and live a good life. Yes, Nan 11 nodded slowly, I can't give you the opportunity to jump off the cliff to commit suicide. Rong Yu paused. If the regent of a country really jumps off the cliff to commit suicide, I'm afraid that the news will make the dignitaries of various countries laugh. Moreover, if Rong Yu disappears in the 9 countries, just this news will spread, and the world will immediately be in chaos. Ambitious people in various countries will no longer be able to sit still. At that time. Tisk. Nan 11 shook her head gently. Even for the sake of the world's stability, she had to protect this person and this heart. The two got on the carriage and continued on their way. Still walking and stopping, playing while walking. On the 2nd day of October, the two arrived outside the imperial city of Dezhou smoothly. Looking at the towering city gate in front of her and the people of the Great Zhou coming in and out of the city gate, Nan 11 sighed softly, a lot of things must have happened in the Great Zhou during the year I was away. I wonder how Prince Yun, the regent, is doing. Prince Yun has nothing to worry about. Rong Yu thought of a message he had just received, but something happened to Lin Xie, who you got along well with before. Lin Xie? Nan 11 lowered the curtain and frowned, what happened to Lin Xie? The carriage slowly drove into the imperial city. Rong Yu sat aside and said calmly, she got married, but the person she married was not reliable. She has been asking for a divorce recently. Paused, but her mother doesn't agree. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 513. Rong Yu's return did not alert anyone. Not even Qi Lin and Ling Fan knew he was coming back at this time. But before Ling Fan came back from Dongling, Rong Yu had told him that he would go back to Dazhu this year. It was almost the end of the year, and Rong Yu didn't go back in the first half of the year. There was a lot of hope for him to come back in the second half of the year, so King Yun was very diligent throughout the year. Government since Ling Fan came back from Zhou dynasty and told him that the regent would return to Zhou dynasty this year, King Yun has been particularly diligent in government and caring for the people. Because he knew his uncle's temper so well that if he were to catch evidence of his laziness, there would be absolutely no room for any excuse. Besides, although Rong Yu didn't say the specific date of return, he could roughly calculate it. Because Nan 11 was pregnant when she left last year, she would have to stay in Dongling to raise the baby before the baby was born. After the baby was born, she would have to undergo confinement. After confinement, it would be a hot summer. With the emperor's love and affection, it is absolutely impossible for the imperial aunt to bear to let her travel in the scorching heat. Autumn is the most comfortable and suitable season for traveling. Therefore, King Yun even forgot about food and sleep during this period, handling the state affairs of the Zhou dynasty in an orderly manner. He got up before dawn in the morning and went to bed late at night. This greatly moved a group of old ministers, and they began to do their best to assist King Yun. When Rong Yu came back, he was faced with a harmonious atmosphere in the palace and a renewed court full of fighting spirit. King Yun is indeed suitable to be the emperor. The carriage stopped outside the palace gate. Nan 11 sat on the carriage and pondered slightly, there is just one problem, we seem to have to consider it in advance. Rong Yu had a good connection with her. When he heard this sentence, he understood what she wanted to say and said lightly, the main purpose of my 10-year plan is to train Hao to become a qualified emperor. As for whether he will really succeed in the future, he has the ambition to unify the world. This is his own business and I will not interfere too much. In other words, if Hao really has the ambition to annex the world, It will only happen after he ascends the throne. What's more, it will happen at least 15 or even 20 years later. What will Dongling and Dazhu be by then? Relationships, the change of emperors in various countries, and how the situation develops are all related to the person sitting on the throne. If the world is to be unified, the power and wealth he has accumulated now will be the bargaining chip that Hauer can use to unify the country in the future. If the 9 countries are still independent, then Dongling's powerful cavalry will be the shield to maintain the stability of the country. Rongyu has fulfilled his responsibility to Dazhu and will not deliberately weaken Dazhu just because Hauer wants to inherit Dongling. However, in the future, he will definitely put his energy on Dongling Shirji and no longer pay attention to Dazhu's affairs. Too much interference. If the 2 countries really face hostility in 20 years, it will be a matter between the 2 emperors and has nothing to do with them. The strong is king, which has been an unchanging rule since ancient times. Nan 11 understood what he meant and raised a clear and soft smile on her lips. Rongyu. Rongyu raised his eyes to look at her. Nan 11 seemed to want to say something, but when the words came to her lips, she felt that maybe there was no need to say more. They just need to understand some things in their hearts and don't need to talk about them all the time. Even if he said it 100 times and 1,000 times, and let the historian use his pen and ink to pile up rhetoric, praise his virtues, and praise him as the first emperor in the world, in the end, this is not what he cares about. His responsibility to the country has always started from the common people. Even though he is in the center of power, there are very few people who can be as rational as him. But the more rational and calm he is, the more it is because of his lack of desire for power. Nan 11 knows him better than anyone else. So there are many things that they just need to understand in their hearts. The carriage was quiet for a moment. Nan 11 suddenly noticed that something was not right in the atmosphere. She opened the curtain and looked outside, only to find that a group of forbidden soldiers had gathered outside the carriage at some point. They all held swords in their hands and had expressionless but alert faces. They stared at their carriage. Nan 11 raised her eyebrows. Are we being treated as assassins? Rongyu didn't say anything, but got up and got out of the carriage first. The feet wearing black deerskin boots stepped on the ground, and then that noble and indifferent face came into the eyes of all the guards, causing their faces to change. Rongyu said nothing, turned around, reached out and took Nan 11 out of the car. A sound of footsteps came from far away and came closer. Who is coming? A cold and solemn voice sounded. The man in charge was Ling Ling, who was wearing the uniform of the Imperial Guard commander. Hearing his subordinates report that a suspicious carriage had arrived outside the palace gate, he came over to check without any delay. However, when the guards moved out of the way, he approached the carriage and saw the long-lost man. He couldn't help but be startled. For a moment, he almost thought he had seen it wrong. Until Rongyu took Nan 11 out of the carriage. Ling Ling suddenly came back to her senses. Your Majesty, Princess. Nan 11 smiled faintly. Commander Ling, are you okay? Really, the Princess Regent? Ling Ling was startled and could no longer care about the surprise. She kneeled down and saluted subconsciously. For your humble position, please see the Regent and see the Princess. The other guards woke up from their trance, knelt down one after another, and respectfully paid homage. See the Prince Regent, meet the Princess Regent. The Imperial Guards guarding the palace never expected that the Regent, who had been away for a year, would come back in such a low-key way. Until the Regent and the Princess appeared outside the palace gate, they had no news at all. Is it because their information is too limited, or is the Regent's movements hidden too successfully? Get up, Rongyu said in a calm voice, holding Nan 11's hand and turning towards the palace gate. Has anything happened in the palace these past 2 days? Ling Ling stood up and followed, reporting back, everything is relatively calm. Prince Yun has already mastered government affairs. The cabinet officials and the 6 ministers are very cooperative with Prince Yun. Except for a few princes who are occasionally a little restless, the court officials rarely make trouble for Prince Yun. All this is due to the few words Rong Yu left before he left last year. Even if the court officials were dissatisfied with Prince Yun, no one dared to challenge the authority of the regent, especially after the regent had just abolished the emperor and the queen mother and ordered Prince Yun to supervise the country. The ministers have not recovered from the aftermath of the abolition of the emperor, who thinks that his life is too long, so he dares to continue to provoke the tiger's head. The prince came back suddenly, and I'm afraid Prince Yun is not prepared to welcome him. Ling Ling lowered his eyes and said, "Should I report it?" "No need," Rong Yu said calmly, "this king has something to ask you." Ling Ling frowned slightly, "Yes. What's the matter with your cousin and Lin Xie?" Ling Ling's cousin and Lin Xie? Nan 11's eyebrows moved slightly, thinking of the nephew of Madame Ling's family. Lin Xie married him. Ling Ling was slightly stunned, and then replied, "The marriage was arranged by the eldest princess. The two got married in March this year. However, Huo Yang was a playboy. Not long after Princess Lin Xie got married, he successively took in 2 beautiful concubines and often visited brothels. The young princess could not bear this humiliation and took the initiative to propose a divorce, but the eldest princess and the Huo family did not agree." Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 514. Marriage arranged by the eldest princess. Nan 11 thought of Lin Xie's selfish mother. Rong Yu abolished the emperor, imprisoned the empress dowager and the queen, but left the eldest princess who lived outside the palace unattended. She didn't expect that this woman had not given up until now and was still stirring up trouble to change the world. Although the Ling family was not a powerful and prominent family, the 2 brothers of the Ling family were valued by the regent. One was in charge of the military power of the military camp, and the other was in charge of the imperial guards in the palace. They almost controlled more than half of the military power inside and outside the court. The main reason why the emperor was imprisoned in Ganyang Palace and could not turn over, in addition to the order of the regent, was the ownership of the imperial guards. If he could get the support of the Ling family, then the emperor would regain power in no time. Rong Shan took advantage of Rong Yu's absence in Dezhou and couldn't wait to marry Lin Jie to Ling Ling in order to get the military support of the Ling family. But Ling Ling was already married, and Ling Fan knew the eldest princess's intentions very well. How could he do as she wished? So Rong Shan set her sights on Mrs. Ling's nephew Huo Yang. Mrs. Ling loved her nephew very much and almost agreed to his every request. After the princess expressed her willingness to marry, Mrs. Ling agreed to it and quickly decided on the marriage after discussing with the Huo family. After listening to Ling Ling's brief account of the past, Nan 11 asked indifferently, "Did Lin Jie agree when she got married?" "This." Ling Ling hesitated for a moment, "I'm not sure. The marriage of a daughter has always been decided by her mother, not to mention that Lin Jie's mother is the eldest princess of the royal family. As long as she decides on the marriage, it's useless for Lin Jie to oppose it. So no one cares whether Lin Jie agrees or not." The only person who raised an opinion in this marriage was Ling Fan. The reason for his opposition was that he didn't want his mother to get involved in the princess's intentions, and he raised his opposition directly, but Mrs. Ling insisted on her own way. In order for her nephew to marry a princess of the royal family, she didn't care what the princess was thinking at all. For this reason, the atmosphere in the Ling family was not very good for a whole month after Ling Fan returned from Dongling, but in the end, they failed to stop Lin Jie from marrying into the Huo family. Nan 11 frowned, Mrs. Ling is very close to the eldest princess. Ling Ling's heart sank, and he lowered his eyes and said, Ling Fan and I have advised my mother to keep a distance from the eldest princess, but she has always been more willful and will not listen to us. However, I have also made it clear that I will never really regard the eldest princess as a relative just because Linjia and Huo Yang are married. Don't be nervous, I'm not blaming you. Nan 11 tilted her head to look at him and smiled lightly. Rong Yu trusts you two brothers, so naturally he won't doubt this kind of thing. I just care about Linjia and want to know how she is doing now. The eldest princess wants the military support of the Ling family, and Mrs. Ling wants her nephew to marry a noble princess. Ling Ling and Ling Fan want to sever their relationship with the eldest princess's mansion. After all, even if there is no marriage relationship with Linjia, the relationship between the two Ling Ling brothers and Huo Yang is not good. Although they are cousins, they have different personalities and dislike each other. They have always kept their distance from each other. The brothers of the Ling family will not stop their mother from loving her nephew, but they are also not interested in building a good relationship with the Huo family. So if they can't stop this marriage, they won't stop it, but they will never get involved with the princess because of it. Rong Yu has no reason to doubt anything at all. Princess Linjia is not in a good situation recently, Ling Ling said. The mother-in-law is strong and the princess is also overbearing. Even if she wants to resist, she is powerless. Nan 11 frowned slightly. The most innocent person in this matter is Linjia. She was used as a pawn by her mother to marry someone she doesn't like. After getting married, she had to endure her husband's philandering and excessive love. If her mother-in-law is also a strong and unreasonable person, you can imagine how difficult her life will be. At this hour, Prince Yun should still be in the imperial study discussing matters with the ministers. Ling Ling said respectfully, Your Highness, are you going there directly? Rong Yu did not answer, but turned to look at Nan 11, Are you tired? Do you want to find a place to rest first? Nan 11 smiled faintly, Since we need to rest, why don't we go back to the regent's palace directly? Rong Yu was silent. It seemed right. Your Highness, have you forgotten that you have a regent's palace after living in the Dongling Palace for a year? Nan 11 raised her eyebrows and looked at him with a smile. If that's the case, I will make fun of you. Rong Yu smiled at the corners of his mouth, and his tone was calm and calm. I originally wanted to say that I didn't forget, but in order to give 11er a chance to make fun of me, you can just assume that I forgot. Ling Ling was secretly surprised. Is this the cold and indifferent regent? Although I have long known that he loves his wife like his life, I have only seen him being strong and cold when he was overbearing and protecting his wife before, and have never seen him so gentle at this moment. It's like a completely different person. Who could believe that a man as cold and ruthless as King Yama could have such a warm and gentle side? Let's go see King Yun first. Nan 11 smiled faintly. See how this little cutie is commanding the country. Ling Ling was silent for a moment, knowing that Nan 11 had ascended the throne as the empress in Dongling, so the completely different demeanor she inadvertently showed at this time was also in line with the identity of a king. In addition, Rong Yu's unconditional love and obedience to her, Ling Ling naturally couldn't treat her as a girl in the boudoir who didn't understand the world. After Nan 11 finished speaking, he took the opportunity to briefly describe the situation in the court. Since Prince Yun became the regent, although not every day has been smooth sailing, there are always some people who have made things difficult for him, but with the two military advisors Qi Lin and Ling Fan, and the assistance of several cabinet and ministers arranged by Rong Yu, as well as the sincere help of Prince Yen, Prince Yun has already held at least half of the power in his hands in this year. However, Prince Rui, Prince Ning and Prince Qi have not given up, and are still looking for opportunities to win over court officials to prepare for the throne in the future. However, despite their ambitions, they have not been able to do anything in recent years. The neutral ministers in the court acted according to Prince Yun's instructions while quietly watching and would not easily support any prince. The regent dared to abolish the emperor, so what if they supported him? Without the support of the regent, who could sit on the throne by themselves? The ministers knew what was going on. Unless they thought they were not going to die fast enough, no one would be stupid enough to stand in line at this time. Anyone with a discerning eye could see who the regent wanted to support. Would they be stupid if they didn't take advantage of the opportunity before King Yun ascended the throne to perform well? The ministers knew what was going on, which was also one of the reasons why King Yun took power smoothly. Written in the author's words, some people may not see it, so I will say it again now. The plot of the male and female protagonists has come to an end. There will be no more exciting ups and downs in the final stage. It will continue to be flat for a while. If you want to see exciting things, wait for the extras. Let me reveal the status of the new book after the Chinese New Year in advance. I know that many readers are not satisfied with the setting of the heroine in this article. They think she is not good at this or that. So in the next book, I will write a strong female protagonist, a real strong female protagonist. The plot will be better than this one, and the style is different. Look forward to it. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 515. There was great discussion in the royal study. The ministers came forward one by one and presented what they wanted to report and the notes they had prepared. The results of the provincial examinations in various places have been released. This time, many young students with outstanding literary talents have emerged. This is the list submitted by officials from various places. Please take a look at it, King Yun. A spy has come to report that the Zhulang mountain area has not been peaceful in the past 3 months. 3 religions and 9 streams have gathered together. It seems that some kind of martial arts conference is going to be held. It has had a great impact on the local people. Please ask King Yun to make a decision. Your Majesty is not young anymore, shouldn't it be time to think about your marriage? Xi'an Palace is making trouble again. Would you like King Yun to send someone over to take a look? King Yun frowned and looked up at the minister who was speaking, who is making trouble in Xi'an Palace. The person who spoke was Yu Sheng, the Minister of Civil Affairs. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. There are not only 2 people serving in the Queen Mother's palace. How do you know there is someone making trouble there? Foreign ministers of the former dynasty are not allowed to enter the harem. This is a rule. How do ministers outside the palace know the situation in Xi'an Palace? Yu Sheng's face changed slightly. I heard Manager Pan accidentally mention. Manager Pan, King Yun said calmly, wasn't he sent to work in Yeding? How could Mr. Yu have the opportunity to talk to him? Yu Sheng's face changed little by little, and there was an obvious look of uneasiness on his face. King Yun did not continue to ask, but said calmly, send Ling Ling to come in. Reporting to King Yun, Commander Ling went to Suanwu Gate. The guard in front of the Imperial Study Room reported, there seems to be something going on over there. Commander Ling went over to take a look. Suanwu men. King Yun frowned, what happened? I don't. The Prince Regent has returned to the palace. Everyone kneels down to greet him. A familiar shout rang out, with a cold and solemn tone. It was the aura of Commander Ling that they were familiar with. When the guards outside the Imperial Study Room heard the sentence, they subconsciously looked up and saw the stern man at a glance. For a moment, they all knelt down and greeted him silently. It was only 1 year, which was not long enough for them to forget the appearance of the regent. Moreover, no matter where he was, the aura surrounding him would always be intimidating, and they could not forget it even if they wanted to. King Yun thumped. The ministers in the royal study were also stunned for a moment, and then looked at each other in confusion. Is this the voice of Commander Ling? Nonsense. They had heard Ling Ling's voice so many times, how could they hear it wrong? But what did he just say? The regent is back. King Yun calmed down, lowered his head to check his appearance as quickly as possible, and made sure there was nothing rude before he said, get ready to welcome the regent. The door of the Imperial Study Room opened, and King Yun hurried out, followed by the ministers. When they walked out of the door, they saw Rong Yu and Nan 11 walking down the palace corridor. They heard correctly, the ruthless and noble regent was indeed back. In an instant, everyone knelt down. He was even more imposing than the emperor when he arrived, and his posture was extremely respectful and humble. "Please see the prince regent, please see the princess regent." Rong Yu walked down the corridor, looked at the people kneeling on the ground, and said in an indifferent tone, "Are you discussing something?" King Yun felt the pressure, but still nodded respectfully, "Yes." King Yun Nan 11 looked at him with a smile, "Long time no see." King Yun said respectfully, "Chu Xiu has met the emperor's aunt." "How is the emperor's aunt?" "Excellent." Nan 11 smiled, "What about you?" King Yun nodded, "My nephew is also very good." "Thank you for your concern, Auntie Huang." Rong Yu didn't stop at his feet, but took Nan 11 on his arm and stepped into the imperial study. "Come in, everyone." King Yun quickly stood up and followed in. The other ministers also stood up and breathed a sigh of relief, feeling that the air around them had become thinner. After not seeing each other for a year, the regent's intimidating aura had not diminished at all, and they felt great pressure as soon as they met. The ministers entered the imperial study. Nan 11 was placed on the brocade couch in the compartment and sat down for a while. Rong Yu stood in front of the imperial case and looked at the papers piled up in the case and the memorials just presented by the ministers. He picked them up and browsed through them casually. Book. Like a student whose homework was being checked by his master, King Yun stood aside with his eyes lowered, waiting nervously and uneasily. Occasionally he quietly raised his head and glanced at Rong Yu, but all he could see was that noble and indifferent profile. There is no emotional fluctuation between the calm brows and eyes, making people unable to see the joy or anger. How come the emperor's uncle, who has been away for a year, still looks like a stranger? Is the Minister of Rights here? Rong Yu tilted his head and glanced at several ministers, but did not see the Minister of Rights. The King Xian is not there either. King Yun replied, "Uncle Huang has not been feeling well these past 2 days. He asked the imperial doctor to prescribe medicine last night and is recuperating in the palace." Hearing this, Rong Yu hummed casually, "Pass it to the Minister of Rights." King Yun turned his head and signaled, and soon a servant hurriedly took the order and left. "Is there a girl you like?" "Ah." King Yun was stunned and looked up at Rong Yu in confusion. "How old are you this year?" Rong Yu glanced at him, walked to the chair behind the imperial court and sat down. "Have you met a girl you like this year?" King Yun was a little unsure of what he meant. He hesitated for a moment and said honestly, "No." After a pause, he added, 24. "Prepare to ascend the throne next month," Rong Yu said calmly, but announced a thunderous decision calmly, "Since there is no girl you like, let's select according to the rules. 1 queen and 4 concubines. You decide the candidates yourself. I will not interfere." The Prince of Yun did not respond for a long time. The other ministers who discussed the matter were shocked. The regent came back so suddenly, just to let the Prince of Yun ascend the throne? Sure enough, the Prince of Yun was the emperor he wanted. Today, the people who were called by the Prince of Yun to discuss the matter were all important officials in the court, and they were also the central ministers who had performed very well recently and held great power. The sudden arrival of the regent caught them off guard, and the sudden announcement of this news at this time undoubtedly shocked them even more. However, after the shock, at least they still had some time to adjust their mood. The princes and other ministers outside the palace were not so lucky. They were afraid that they didn't know the news of the regent's return at all. I don't know what their reaction would be when they knew that the Prince of Yun was about to ascend the throne tomorrow. "Your Majesty, Uncle." Prince Yun seemed to be awakened and looked up at Rong Yu, "So sudden." Rong Yu looked at him without any emotion. "I remember asking Ling Fan to inform you." Prince Yun was speechless. He was indeed informed, but this time he came back and didn't even have time to sit in the chair, and suddenly announced such a big thing. Aren't you worried about scaring the ministers? I already know your performance in the court. Now is the most appropriate time to ascend the throne. Rong Yu said calmly. After ascending the throne, you can choose a queen and consolidating the imperial power, which will make your throne more stable. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 516. After all, King Yun had a weak foundation, even with this year's experience, the experience of being a regent for 12 months, the assistance of the court ministers assigned to him by Rong Yu, and the support of the Ling brothers and Qi Lin. But most of them were frightened by Rong Yu's pressure and had to obey him. Once King Yun really ascends the throne, for the emperor, his connections and power will appear to be too weak, because King Yun does not have the military exploits and majesty that Rong Yu has accumulated over the years, nor the courage to be feared and surrendered, nor the fear and scruples. Means. Merely being an emperor cannot make his courtiers obedient, especially after Rong Yu leaves the Zhou dynasty. He will lose the deterrence that Rong Yu brings to the courtiers. As time goes by, this deterrence becomes weaker and weaker, and the effect will become smaller and smaller. So he must become stronger himself. But as a prince who has lived in peace with the world for 20 years, it is not easy to become powerful in a short period of time. Choosing a concubine and establishing a queen is currently the best way. The ministers present also knew that if the regent really allowed King Yun to ascend the throne as emperor, he would not be able to watch the situation where the king is weak and the ministers are strong. The final result of the queen's selection of concubines must also be a situation that King Yun can control. At this time, the regent spoke about this matter in front of them without hesitation. Although it could be said to be a sign of trust in them, at the same time, it was also an invisible blow. The ministers lowered their eyebrows and were silent, thinking secretly in their hearts. Report to the regent. His Royal Highness Prince Yun the Chamberlain respectfully reported from outside. The Minister of Rights has arrived. King Yun turned his head. Let him come in. The Minister of Rights came in quickly and saluted Rong Yu respectfully. No need. Rong Yu looked at him calmly. King Yun will ascend the throne in November. The Ministry of Rights will be responsible for choosing an auspicious day, arranging the process of the enthronement ceremony, and tailoring the dragon robe and crown for King Yun. I will give you 3 days' time. Will present the right day, and there must be no mistake. The Minister of Rights took the lead to accept the order before he could think about it carefully. After he respectfully agreed, he slowly realized that the regent was planning to support King Yun to ascend the throne. That is to say, King Yun was about to become the new emperor of the great Zhou dynasty. The Minister of Rights was surprised, but his face showed no emotion at all. He just couldn't help but wonder, is there really no chance for the Emperor of Qianyang Palace to stand up? King Yun will stay, and the others will go out first. Rong Yu said calmly. The Ministry of Etiquette will be very busy this month. The other adults are responsible for assisting and arranging and counting the roster of girls of suitable age in the imperial capital. The legitimate daughters of all officials above 5th rank all are included in the statistics, except for those who are engaged in marriage. Once the statistics are completed, they will be reported. Yes. Go to work. The ministers respectfully resigned with heavy and complicated thoughts. Everyone filed out, and the imperial study room became empty in an instant. Uncle Emperor King Yun was silent for a moment and then hesitantly said, "Is the draft a little too urgent?" He didn't know much about the girls from the families of many officials in the imperial capital, and he didn't know how to get along with them if they were chosen to join the palace rashly. What if the girl didn't want to join the palace at all, or was forced to join the palace by her father, and then fell in love with him? There is no rush for the draft, Rong Yu said in a calm tone. For the time being, it is just a wake-up call for the ministers. When the time comes, it will be your own decision to choose the concubine and queen. I have no intention of interfering much. This country will be yours from now on. After taking the throne, I will no longer care about the success or failure of the great Zhou dynasty. King Yun's expression changed slightly. Uncle Emperor, won't you ask any more questions? What, Rong Yu looked at him calmly, do you want me to always be on top of you, like Rong Chuiyun before? King Yun was silent for a moment, looking down at the black palace tile floor under his feet, and murmured in a low voice, actually, if there is really an imperial uncle pressing down on me, I would feel at ease. As long as the emperor's uncle is here, other countries will not be able to take advantage of Zhou. With the surrounding areas stable, he can govern the world without distractions and do what an emperor should do. If the emperor's uncle is not here, if the border is to raise troops again, and his throne is not yet secure, how can he have the energy to deal with others? When the time comes for internal and external troubles, I'm afraid that I will be in chaos. King Yun felt his scalp numb when he thought about the situation in the future. This king has decided to return to the country this time. He will return to Dongling soon, and will not come back to Zhou dynasty often in the future, Rong Yu said calmly. So the balance of power between the emperor and the ministers, the forces of the various factions in the court, how to compete in separate courts, how to distribute interests among families, how to reuse loyal officials, and how to check and balance powerful officials will all be your own business from now on, and you have to learn to adapt. To be honest, it was rare for King Yun to hear Rong Yu speak such long words to him in his entire life, and what was rare was that although his tone was always indifferent, it sounded somewhat serious and thoughtful. I don't know if it was his imagination. King Yun was rarely touched, but it was true. He felt that the sun might have risen from the west. He actually felt a trace of undetectable warmth in this extremely cold and hard uncle. However, I was moved, and it was also true that King Yun was under great pressure. Especially after Rong Yu said that he would not come back to Dazhu often in the future. King Yun couldn't help but turn his head and glance in the direction of Dongnuan Pavilion. Nan 11 was resting and reading in the Nuan Pavilion. Naturally, he couldn't see her through the tight curtain, but what King Yun couldn't help thinking at this time was, who holds the power of Dongling? Is the emperor really going to put all his thoughts on Dongling in the future? But Dazhu is where his roots lie, so how could he just let it go? What are you thinking about? Rong Yu frowned, his tone cold. Does what I said embarrass you? King Yun thought about it and decided to speak his mind to him openly. Uncle knows how lazy I was before, so lazy that I had no power at all. The ministers available in the court have their own masters. Some still miss the deposed emperor, and some are ministers of the Ning Wang or Rui Wang faction. Although they have been afraid of the pressure from the uncle this year, they have to listen to my orders, but this does not mean that they really obey me, not to mention dash. You know your situation, but you can't change it. Rong Yu raised his eyes and calmly interrupted him. The ministers in the court each serve their own masters. Is there no neutral loyal minister available? King Yun was silent. Yes, there are, but dash. In the past year, you didn't take the opportunity to gather loyal and reliable ministers for your own use, so that they would willingly submit to you. King Yun's expression was slightly tense. Yes, but dash. I can at least point out 10 ministers at the center of power, all of whom have no ulterior motives. Rong Yu's tone became more and more faint. And the young upstarts that I promoted for you before I left last year, you didn't train them well. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 517. Prince Yun was silent, and suddenly he had nothing to say. He was doing all that Rong Yu said, and he was doing it well. In general, the current situation in the court was quite stable. Except for Prince Rui, Prince Qi, and Prince Ning, who had not given up, the court officials were either afraid of Rong Yu's majesty or really willing to work for the people. At least most of them were reliable. After all, Rong Yu had made some adjustments to the court before he left. The old party that belonged to the deposed emperor had completely lost power and there was no possibility of a revival. Although the ambitions of the other princes remained undiminished, they were originally restrained from each other. Moreover, in recent years, with the ascension of Rong Chuiyun and the suppression of Rong Yu, the regent, their power could not continue to grow. In addition, the new nobles in the court that Rong Yu had just promoted would all be capable ministers after Prince Yun ascended the throne. Rong Yu had cleared the risks for him in the short term. As long as Prince Yun's heart was in the country, when something that shouldn't have happened really happened in the future, Prince Yun, the emperor, would have the ability to control the gap. In fact, it was not that Prince Yun had no confidence in himself, nor was he really afraid of anything, but he had always felt that Rong Yu was guarding the Great Zhou, and Rong Yu was the guardian god of the Great Zhou. Once he left the Great Zhou, it seemed as if he had lost his backbone. That kind of dependence was deeply rooted in his subconscious, just like, well, like the feeling of a young eagle just leaving the old eagle and flying alone, with a bit of excitement, but also accompanied by anxiety and timidity, which was actually quite complicated psychologically. It was just that this complicated and unnecessary worry was exposed by Rong Yu's questioning, so that Prince Yun couldn't find the right words to defend himself for a while. The throne is of vital importance. Although there are suitable candidates, one must also have a heart for the country. Nan 11 came out of the warm room at some point and spoke gently, rather than saying that you are worried about not being able to do well, it is better to say that your heart is not here. Chu Xiu, are you very opposed to being an emperor? King Yun turned his head and looked at Nan 11, whose eyebrows were gentle, thought for a while, and slowly shook his head. No rejection. If you are in the royal family, it is self-deception to say that you have no idea of being an emperor. There are no brothers in the royal family. Sitting on that position means holding the power of life and death, and if someone else is the emperor, it means that your life is in the hands of others at any time. Not to mention the righteousness of having a heart for the country and seeking the welfare of the people, just from the perspective of one's own interests. No one does not know the benefits of being an emperor. King Yun knows very well that if he does not do it now, no matter whether it is King Ning, King Qi, or King Rui who will do it in the future, he will not be as free and easy as before. There is a sword hanging over his head at any time. Besides, Prince Yun really wanted to do something for the Great Zhou from the bottom of his heart. He had to keep a low profile because he was indifferent to fame and fortune before, but if there was such an opportunity, who wouldn't want to be the supreme ruler that all the people submit to? He just. As for choosing a queen, Rong Yu, and I can give you some advice. Nan 11 smiled lightly, since you don't have a favorite girl, then the choice of a concubine must be based on actual interests. The girl who enters the palace must be the daughter of a loyal minister, and she cannot be the daughter of a single family. You must make powerful and capable ministers willing to serve the monarch, and at the same time, they can check and balance each other, so that you can free up your hands to do other things. This is the power of the emperor. Prince Yun looked at Nan 11 in amazement, and after a long time, he was really impressed. The emperor's aunt really has the demeanor of an emperor. Nan 11 laughed in shock. Flattering can't make your uncle soft-hearted. Prince Yun was instantly deflated. He wanted to say that he was not flattering, but he really felt that Nan 11 had changed a lot, and she was very majestic and looked nothing like the little girl who was pampered in the palace by the emperor's uncle. But this is not important for the time being. He turned his head and looked at Rong Yu resignedly. How long does the emperor's uncle plan to stay this time? He may leave at any time. King Yun muttered, I think the weather will be best after the new year and in the spring, suitable for traveling. At least he can stay for a while to shock those who have different intentions in the court, especially his brothers who are still eyeing the throne, and give him more time to adapt to the fact that he has become the emperor. Rong Yu glanced at him and said nothing. Nan 11 smiled. Chu Xiu, your emperor's uncle led troops to sweep across the northern border when he was 14 years old. You are 24 years old this year. You can try to learn Rongyu's momentum and make the court officials fear you like a tiger. Then you can sit firmly as the emperor and no one dares to resist. King Yun was silent. Learn from the emperor's uncle? He wanted to learn, but could he learn it? However, Nan 11's words reminded him that his uncle was born late. When his grandfather was in power, he already had many grandchildren, but he had another son in his old age. As a result, after his father ascended the throne, this young uncle was about the same age as the princes, and even younger than several older princesses and princes. Probably no one expected that this latest born prince would become the most powerful regent in the Great Zhou. Prince Yun couldn't help but think of a possibility. Would children born late be particularly powerful and gifted? If he also had another child when he was 50 years old, would the child be as powerful as his uncle? Children born before the age of 50 can be raised freely, without a crown prince, and they can be trained to write poems and songs, and become idle princes. When the time comes, the most powerful one will be selected to ascend the throne as emperor. Prince Yun Nan 11's eyes fell on the corners of Prince Yun's mouth that were obviously raised, and he spoke thoughtfully, "What are you thinking about? You look so excited." King Yun suddenly came back to his senses, quickly suppressed the smile that had inadvertently appeared on his lips, and replaced it with a humble expression, "Reply to the imperial aunt, I am thinking of something interesting." Nan 11 raised an eyebrow, "Interesting thing?" King Yun did not dare to tell her the real thoughts in his heart, and coughed lightly, "The country is interesting. My nephew is thinking about how to govern the country well and make the Great Zhou continue to prosper, so as not to disappoint the imperial uncle and the imperial aunt for their painstaking cultivation. Think about today's matter carefully." Rongyu stood up and said, "I will do my best to help you. He came over, I will go back to the palace first." "Yes. The emperor's uncle and aunt have traveled a long way, so go back to the palace early and have a good rest." Prince Yun lowered his head, and just after he finished speaking, he remembered another thing: Chu Xiu hasn't congratulated the emperor's uncle and aunt yet. I wonder if they gave Chu Xiu a brother or a sister. Brother Nan 11 smiled, "You should be glad that your emperor's uncle is just your emperor's uncle, not your father. Your brother was made the crown prince as soon as he was born. He has a heavy responsibility. He will live in dire straits in the future and work hard for the country of Dongling all his life. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered." Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 518. King Yun was completely speechless. The moment Rongyu and Nan 11 stepped out of the palace gate, most of the powerful officials in the imperial capital knew the news of his return. All the major families were well informed. If Rongyu hadn't deliberately concealed his whereabouts, everyone would have known about it before he set foot in the imperial city. However, no matter how powerful other people were, they couldn't resist Rongyu's wishes. People know. Now that he appeared in the palace, he did not tell the ministers who had seen him not to make any news. It was normal for the news to spread quickly. Not long after returning to the palace, someone came to see him. Rongyu didn't want to see anyone, he just wanted to have a good sleep with Nan 11. The trim white fingers habitually entangled Nan 11's hair. The freshly bathed hair still had a pleasant fragrance on it, making people unable to help but feel nostalgic. Rongyu's voice was low, "Are you still used to returning to the palace?" "Get used to it." Nan 11 leaned on the bedside, with a smile on her lips and a gentle look on her eyebrows. "There's nothing I'm not used to in a place with you, even if it's a thatched hut." These words of love penetrated Rongyu's vitals, leaving him helpless, and his heart felt soft and moved. Even though Nan 11 never hesitated to say coaxing words to him, Rongyu could be moved and delighted every time, making her uncontrollably fermented and emotionally overflowing. Rongyu pursed his lips and was silent for a moment, then whispered, "When we go to Kangyun Mountain later, we will find a beautiful place in the mountains, build a thatched house, and occasionally stay there for 2 days to enjoy the sunrise and sunset. You can also open up a piece of land in front of and behind the house to grow some fruits and vegetables to be self-sufficient. Isn't there a ready-made palace on Kangyun Mountain? Nan 11 tilted her head and raised her eyebrows in a subtle way. Do you want to experience the civilian life of men farming and women weaving? Rong Yu chuckled. Does 11er like that kind of lifestyle? Nan 11 thought for a while, then slowly shook her head and sighed. My hands may not be able to hold a hoe. It doesn't matter. There are many masters on the mountain, so there is no need for 11er to do it by herself. Rong Yu said, I can just watch the sunrise and sunset with 11er every day. Kangyun Mountain has a beautiful scenery. We can live on the mountain for a few months every year. The rest of the time travel around the world, go to places with beautiful scenery, and experience the national characteristics of various countries and places. Go to the warm south in winter and stay in the mountains to escape the heat in summer. Let the subordinates of Juxiao Pavilion pay attention to the movements of all parties. There's so much fun to see, so let's go ahead and see the fun. Rong Yunan 11 sighed softly. You are stern and self-possessed in front of King Yun, and the pressure of the regent is scary. From now on, you will definitely teach her to be both strict and enlightened, with the country and the country as your top priority. But if King Yun and Hao know that you are happily planning a leisurely and secluded life in the future, so I wonder what they will think. Rong Yu looked at her quietly. 11er. Nan 11 raised her eyebrows slightly. Huh. Don't undermine me. Rong Yu leaned over and kissed her. His voice was low and sweet. There must be someone to pass on the country and the country. It is better to teach people to fish than to teach them to fish. I have taught them both fish and fishing. It not only gave them a ready-made empire, so that they did not have to compete for heirlooms by fighting for heirs, but also clearly taught them the way to be kings, except that they were not told step by step what the emperor should do every day, what to eat, what to wear, and when to sleep. Although this is for the sake of our future happy life, I have done everything I need to do to at least ensure that I will not leave any hidden dangers to Dazhu and Dongling Zhongshan while I am alive. Nan 11 was silent for a moment, then raised her hand to caress his noble eyebrows. Her eyes fell on his face, and she couldn't help but kiss his lips. Her voice was extremely gentle. You are the best. This sentence definitely has a special magic. Before Rong Yu had time to be happy about her initiative to kiss him, he heard this compliment in his ears, and his handsome face suddenly warmed up, and a rare hint of shyness appeared. 11er is a great compliment, and I am ashamed of my husband to deserve it. Nan 11 laughed and said, You deserve the most praise and praise. Hearing this, Rong Yu turned over neatly and pushed her down. In that case, 11er should express it in another way. In what way? 11er, don't act stupid. I'm stupid to begin with. 11er is not stupid. Rong Yu breathed into her ear. You are the smartest woman in the world. Yet. In the beautiful moment of spring, Rong Yu was of course unwilling to respond to this question and directly put his thoughts into action. In her busy schedule, Nan 11 took the time to speak. Rong Yu. Tonight I'm going to see Lin Xia. There's no rush. Rong Yu's voice was deep. You don't have time to go there tonight. Nan 11's voice paused. I'm free. No time. Rong Yu insisted. We'll discuss her matters tomorrow. Nan 11 seemed to want to say something more, but suddenly she took a heavy breath, holding half of her breath in her lungs. It took a long time to catch her breath, and then she said nothing more. Only some indescribable sounds echoed in the inner hall without stopping for a long time. The peaceful imperial capital quietly exploded due to Rong Yu's sudden return. Especially after learning that Rong Yu had ordered the Ministry of Rites to prepare for the enthronement ceremony and decided to let King Yun ascend the throne, several royal palaces could no longer sit still and sent people out to find out the news. They frequently visited officials and secretly discussed countermeasures. But they found that the fate was decided and the situation could not be reversed. Is it really determined that King Yun will ascend the throne? It's true. As soon as the regent returned to the palace, he asked the Ministry of Rites to tailor a dragon robe for Prince Yun, and picked an auspicious day next month to hold the coronation ceremony. The regent's mind is indeed unpredictable. After Rong Chewyun was deposed, many people thought that Rong Yu would ascend the throne himself. Who would have thought that 1 year after leaving the Great Zhou, he would directly help Prince Yun ascend the throne? A powerless prince should have accomplished nothing and be an idle prince for life. However, Rong Yu gave him a year to grow his wings and accumulate power, learn to handle government affairs, and ascended the throne directly a year later, catching everyone off guard. It also left the three princes powerless to fight back. The king of Qi and the king of Rui secretly hated him, but they had no choice but to continue waiting for an opportunity. In addition to the three palaces, the one that reacted most to the sudden return of the regent and his wife was the former Nanxiang mansion, now the residence of Lord Nanxian. It was idle, but it still had a rank, so some people privately nicknamed him Lord Nanxian. Rong Yu and Nan 11 left the Great Zhou for a year, and Nan Xingzi's mansion was in decline for a year. In addition to maintaining the rank and the meager salary that a fourth-rank official should have, the Nan mansion had no other income. But the Nan family had a large population, and that little salary was not enough to cover even the most basic daily expenses. Even with the gold and silver jewelry that Nan Jiao had previously given herself to the Prince of Northern Frontier to barely make ends meet, the life of the Nan mansion was extremely difficult. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 519. Of course, the most painful thing is not having money, but having to endure beatings from time to time. Although Nan Xingzi is idle at home, he still goes out every once in a while. Every time he goes out, he hears people talking about the Nan family in the streets. I felt that my face was shameless, and when I came back, I punched and kicked Li and her daughter. Nan mansion owed money from outside. Every time someone came to collect debts, Nan Xingzi would feel that his reputation for integrity for many years had been ruined. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that it was all thanks to the Li family and his daughter. Then there was another round of punches. Hit and kick. Every time he was short of money and couldn't come up with any money, Nan Xingzi couldn't help but think of his extremely wealthy first wife and his daughter who was married to the regent. He thought of the mother and daughter who were now the eldest princess and the empress of Dongling. But he was reduced to such a situation, and he felt regretful, hateful, and angry. Naturally, he couldn't help but spread his anger on Li's mother and daughter, and they were beaten and kicked again. In short, the Lis and their daughters have really been living in dire straits this year. They are always in the situation of being beaten or about to be beaten. His wife was proud of herself. Gatherings among the wives of major aristocratic families in the imperial capital were without Li, and the flower viewing banquets for the legitimate daughters and concubines automatically passed by Nan Xiao. Even for marriage, the Nan family was excluded from the list of candidates for consideration by matchmakers. Outside. Apart from ridicule, the Nan family has nothing to talk about. But the sudden return of the regent and his wife was like a rain from heaven, which suddenly cheered up Nan Xingzi, who had been depressed for a long time. Somebody come. The only boy left in the main courtyard woke up from his nap, yawned, turned around and walked into the main room with loose steps. Master. Nan Xingzi gave him a cold look, very dissatisfied with his laziness. However, he knew his current situation and had no intention of arguing with him, so he directly ordered him to prepare hot water. Nan Xingzi took a happy bath and took out a new robe from the closet that he had made last year but was reluctant to wear. After putting it on, he carefully arranged his appearance in front of the mirror. Although he looks a little thinner, he still has the same style as before, without losing his composure and majesty. Then he turned around and walked out of the house and walked into Lee's yard. Lee's face was covered with bruises and she was sitting in front of the dressing table combing her hair. When she heard the maid tremblingly calling master, her expression suddenly changed and she quickly stood up to hide, but she didn't know where to hide. Just at this moment, Nan Xingzi had already stepped in. A shivering expression flashed across Li's face, which was both fearful and resentful. She no longer had the charming look before. Old master, I just had a beating yesterday and are you here again today? Ms. Li was depressed and desperate. She didn't know when such days would end. Msli Nan Xingzi straightened his robes and looked at her with his hands behind his hands. His expression did not look as angry and sinister as before. I have something to tell you. Li was startled and looked at him suspiciously. Master. Nan 11 is back, Nan Xingzi said solemnly. He is now at the regent's mansion. Li was startled for a moment, and then she understood what he was talking about. Her face turned green and white for a moment, and she gritted her teeth with hatred. She also thought about the proud life of that man under the protection of the regent, which was in sharp contrast to the current abjection of Nanfu, making her even disqualified from hatred and disgust. Mrs. Li sneered in her heart and spoke in a neutral tone. She is the regent princess now. I am just a fourth-grade official without a position. According to the rules, I should respectfully address the regent princess. If the regent knows that the master treats him, the princess calls you by her first name, I'm afraid I'll punish you with a great crime of disrespect. When Nan Xingzi heard this, a gloomy and angry look appeared on his face. Ms. Li, are you itchy again? Li's face turned pale and she clenched her hands fiercely. She felt the scars on her face hurt again. I am no more than a weak female. I can beat you whenever I want and scold you whenever I want. How could you ever treat me like a human being? See. The Yuan family is noble and wealthy. I'm afraid I've already regretted treating her like that. Why, now that Nan 11 is back, I want to take back this daughter. Do you want the regent to think that you are Nan 11's father? For my own sake, will I show you some mercy and let you go back to being the majestic prime minister you were before? Shut up. Nan Xingzi was furious and raised his hand to slap her on the face. Ms. Li, if you want to die, I can help you at any time and let your despicable daughter die with you. Snap. With a crisp sound, Ms. Li covered her face and stared at him with eyes full of hatred. Besides beating women, do you have nothing else to do now? In your heart, Jiao Jiao is just a bitch. Daughter. Nan Xingzi became angry and couldn't help but want to take action again. However, he quickly thought of the purpose of coming here today and restrained his violent actions. He said coldly, if you want to continue to live this kind of life of being beaten and impoverished every day, you can keep making sarcastic remarks to me. Li bit her lip, listening to his words. She seemed to really want to give in to Nan 11. She couldn't help but want to sneer, but she couldn't. Over the past year or so, she has lived through enough poverty and been too scared. She can no longer bear the brutal beatings that come from time to time. The old wounds on her body have not yet healed, but new ones have appeared. I was injured and was tossing and turning in pain all day long. She really didn't want to live a day like this anymore. Thinking of this, she had to suppress the strong hatred in her heart and said firmly, if you have anything to say, please tell me. Let Nan Jiao go to the regent's palace, Nan Xingzi ordered. Apologize to Nan 11, be as pitiful as possible, and make Nan 11 soften her heart. Li looked at him in disbelief. Let Jiao Jiao go. Are you still asking me to go? Nan Xingzi said coldly. They are sisters with deep affection, so it is easier to talk. Li was silent for a long time. Her eyebrows and eyes were gloomy, and I don't know what she was thinking. After a long while, she said, what happened after the meeting? Master, do you think Nan 11 is so easy to fool? Can you really make her have a deep sisterly love? That's Nan Jiao's business. You can do it yourself, Nan Xingzi said coldly. If she can make Nan 11 change her mind, her future marriage will be settled. You should know the influence of the regent in the Great Zhou. As long as Nan 11 is still willing to recognize Nan Jiao as her sister, even if she loses her virginity, there are still many people in the imperial capital who are willing to take Nan Jiao as a concubine to please the regent. Even if it is for Nan Jiao's lifelong event, you, as a mother, should think of a way. After these words came out, Li was completely speechless. She finally knew how shameless this man could be for the sake of interests and future. In his eyes, his own daughter was actually no different from a cat or a dog. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 520. Although Rong Yu acted like a loyal dog in front of Nan 11 most of the time, he would say whatever Nan 11 said and would never resist. But sometimes, he is also very tough. For example, last night. When he said he didn't have time, he really didn't have time. Nan 11 was trapped between the beds by him until midnight and fell asleep from exhaustion. She no longer had the energy to think about Linxia. I slept until noon the next day, missed breakfast, and even had lunch half an hour late. There were countless people outside the palace asking to see them, but Rong Yu was nowhere to be seen. However, before Nan 11 woke up, Rong Yu had already ordered someone to inquire about the Huo family's affairs. He also knew that Linjia was taught a lesson by Mrs. Huo last night, and that Huo Yang stayed in the brothel all night and did not go home until dawn. Linjia comes from a noble family. What's rare is that she is kind-hearted and sincere in her treatment of others. Her life should not be wasted by such a man. She deserves a better man. Nan 11 sat at the dining table, frowning slightly. You send a message and ask Linjia to come over in the name of the regent. Rong Yu said, I thought you would go to the Huo family in person. Why are you going to the Huo family? Nan 11 smiled lightly, I'm not interested in the Huo family. Whether it's the overbearing Mrs. Huo or the coquettish Huo Yang, I don't intend to waste words with them. They can be solved with power. There is no need to waste extra time and energy on the problem. Use reason with reasonable people and brute force with unreasonable people. Nan 11 could tell from just a few words spoken by Rong Yu and Ling Ling that Mrs. Huo was a selfish and unreasonable mother-in-law. Her attitude towards Linjia was probably related to the attitude of the eldest princess Rong Shan. The mother had no intention of protecting her daughter. Naturally, my husband's family bullied me blatantly. So what if you are the princess? A woman who leaves the court has become a member of her husband's family, and her fate in this life is tied to her husband. Her father is absent, and her mother is indifferent to her, and even stands on the same front as her husband's family to force her. How can a delicate girl be like this? Room for resistance. Nan 11 didn't intend to reason with anyone. She wouldn't stay in Dazhu for long anyway. No matter what those people said, as long as she could get Linjia out of the predicament she was in, it didn't matter what others said. Rong Yu agreed, sent someone to the Huo family to deliver the order, and then began to concentrate on serving Nan 11's meal. You must be starving. Eat more to replenish your body. Rong Yu gave her dishes, which were filled with Nan 11's favorite flavors. Have a good rest today. When Linjia comes over, she will stay with you in the palace. You talk, I'll go to the palace to take care of something. Nan 11 nodded, just go and do your work and don't worry about me. What are you talking about? Rong Yu was dissatisfied. Is there anything in this world that is more important than you? Nan 11 was silent for a moment and glanced at him casually. Why are you so excited? 11 You are not more important than me, you have to do what you should do. Nan 11 said, just like in my heart, no one in the world is more important than you, so can I just ignore everyone in the world? It sounded like a scolding tone, but his words made Rong Yu feel elated. No one in the world is as important as him. Well, there is probably no love words in the world that are more touching than this one. Rong Yu smiled with a smile on his brows and nodded sincerely. 11er taught you the right lesson. My husband is so narrow-minded that he deserves to be punished. You are punished to sleep outside tonight, Nan 11 said calmly. I was too tired last night. I need to have a good sleep tonight. No one is allowed to disturb me. It's my fault. Rong Yu pursed her lips and admitted her mistake sincerely. I promise to sleep with you tonight and never mess around again. Nan 11 snorted and believed his lies. Just after lunch, the person who came to deliver the order brought Linjia over. Rong Yu arranged the defense outside the palace and asked Linjia to stay in the palace to talk to Nan 11. He took Qingyang into the palace alone. The maid quickly led Linjia into the palace. Seeing Nan 11 sitting in front of the window, Linjia's eyes were slightly startled. He looked at her for a long time as if he was in another world, and then raised his lips and smiled softly. Uncle and Grandma. Nan 11 chuckled. Call me by my name, don't call me old. Then he asked her to sit down and asked the maid to serve tea. When did your uncle and you come back? Linjia sat down on the couch opposite her, his eyes locked on Nan 11's increasingly calm and soft eyebrows. Have you been in Dongling this year? Nan 11 took a sip of tea and nodded. Yes. Becoming the queen of Dongling. Nan 11 continued to nod. Linjia stood up hastily. Then do I want to meet Her Majesty the Queen? Sit down. Nan 11 raised her hand. Why are you so polite? This is not Dongling. It's not Dongling, but she is also the regent princess of the great Zhou dynasty. Her status is not much inferior to that of the empress. After all, the regent prince of the great Zhou dynasty is a more majestic existence than the emperor. The courtiers of the great Zhou dynasty respect the regent far more than they respect the emperor. Of respect. Linjia sat down hesitantly. I heard that you have left the cabinet. Nan 11 looked at her eyebrows and eyes, and it was obvious that she looked haggard. How are you doing? Linjia's expression changed slightly. She closed her eyes and was silent for a moment, then said calmly, you are marrying someone who is not a human being. Nan 11 put down the teacup and said calmly, is the Huo family treating you badly? Isn't it just bad? Linjia smiled bitterly. I just hate that I don't have the courage you did back then, otherwise how could I have put myself in such a situation? Sometimes when I'm pushed into a hurry, I really wish I could die with the Huo family. Nan 11 frowned. Can you tell me about it? There's nothing I can't say. Linjia sighed self-deprecatingly, her tone calm. Now all the noble ladies in the imperial capital are watching my joke. No one knows that I married a romantic dandy and have a mother-in-law. He is domineering and domineering all day long, wishing he could sit on top of me and let me kneel down and serve their whole family like a slave. From time to time, he would remind me to humbly please my husband. This life is like a normal one. It's like a nightmare, and it makes me exhausted. After a slight pause in her tone, she said calmly, but I am also the princess of the royal family. How can he, the Huo family, humiliate me? I would rather die than bow down to them. Nan 11 said, do you still plan to continue living with such a man? What kind of life do you have? Linjia sneered, even if all the men in the world die, I can't live with him forever. Nan 11 raised her eyes and looked at her quietly. I want to reconcile. Linjia's tone was firm, but with a hint of helpless sadness. To be precise, I want to imitate your momentum and divorce him directly, but I have no power, mother. I am not allowed to make such an unorthodox decision. Let alone divorcing my husband, even getting divorced is a very difficult matter. Nan 11 pondered for a moment. Have you thought about it? Won't you regret it after the divorce? I only regret it when my brain is wet. Linjia said, since we got married, Huo Yang and I have not consummated our marriage.